Welcome to True Echo, where real stories echo louder than fiction. Today's powerful drama begins at a quiet bank in St. Louis, where a 62-year-old black woman in her Sunday best is called a scammer, humiliated at the counter, and forced to watch as a teller shreds a check her son sent her. But within minutes, everything changes, because her son's face suddenly appears on the bank's digital wall. What happens next will shake the entire institution, and leave the whole city talking. Stay with us. Helen Bradford had always believed in handling things with grace. Even as the world moved faster, colder, and more dismissive of women like her, she refused to let it change her nature. Raised in the old tradition of, be polite, be prepared, and keep your head held high, she still greeted strangers with a smile and took pride in how she presented herself, even if all she was doing was running an errand. And on that particular Thursday morning in St. Louis, Helen's errand was a simple one: deposit a check from her son, Anthony. She wore her lavender church dress, a favorite she reserved for good days and good intentions. Her natural hair was pinned up neatly, her purse held a crisp white envelope, and her face carried the calm dignity of a woman who had survived grief, worked hard for everything, and never asked for more than she earned. The check was for $9,800. A generous gift from her son after she mentioned her water heater had gone out. She hadn't asked. But Anthony insisted. "It's not charity, Ma," he'd told her over the phone. "It's gratitude." She'd smiled then, proud and quietly moved. And now, as she entered the familiar branch of First Guardian Bank, a place she'd been using since it was a humble credit union, she expected nothing more than a routine transaction. Instead, what unfolded would become one of the most painful and public humiliations of her life. She waited patiently at the teller window, watching the young woman on the other side, Danielle, tap away on her screen with long acrylic nails. When she finally looked up, Helen greeted her politely and handed over the check. Danielle barely glanced at it. "Is this yours?" she asked with suspicion, her voice clipped. Helen blinked. "Yes, ma'am. It's from my son. He sent it yesterday." Danielle lifted the check like it was contaminated. "Do you even have an account here?" Helen tried to keep her voice even. "Yes. For over 20 years. Danielle typed her name, then looked again at the check. "Anthony Bradford," she said slowly, as if testing the name on her tongue. "And who exactly is that?" Helen's throat tightened. "My son. He owns Bradford Solutions. He works in renewable energy." Danielle didn't nod or smile. She just narrowed her eyes. "This is almost $10,000, she said sharply. "I need to verify it." Helen offered calmly, "You can call him. I can give you his number." But Danielle didn't pick up the phone. Instead, she reached for the paper shredder beside her desk and, without warning, fed the check into it. The soft hum of the blades was the loudest sound Helen had heard in years. Helen's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the shredder, stunned into silence. The young teller didn't even flinch. "If it's legit," Danielle said flatly, "he can issue you another one. We don't process suspicious checks. Especially not for that amount." Her voice held no apology. Just cold finality. Helen's cheeks burned. She could feel the eyes on her now. At least two people in line had turned to look. One man in a gray cap slowly shook his head. The other, a younger woman with a stroller, looked between the teller and Helen with disbelief. Still, Helen didn't raise her voice. She didn't lash out. That wasn't her way. "I'd like to speak to your manager," she said softly, clenching her purse with trembling hands. Danielle shrugged, already turning to the next customer. "You can come back with proper documents," she said dismissively. "Next, please." Helen stepped aside in silence, her step small, controlled. She found a vinyl chair in the waiting area and sat down slowly, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her throat burned, but she didn't cry. Not here. Not yet. 15 years ago, she had cried in public. At her husband's funeral. That had been the last time. Now, in the same bank where she'd once cashed her first paycheck as a school custodian, she sat as if she were some stranger. Someone unwelcome. Someone unworthy. The weight of humiliation pressed against her chest like a stone. It wasn't just the loss of the check. It was the way Danielle had looked at her, like she didn't belong. Like she was pretending to be someone she couldn't possibly be. That was the real pain. The bank manager appeared a few minutes later, a man in a sharp navy suit and shiny shoes. Mid-40s. Slick hair. He leaned over Danielle's desk, whispered something, then turned briefly to look at Helen from a distance. Their eyes met. And then, nothing. He turned and walked back into his office without a word. Helen sat straighter, chin up, holding every bit of grace she could gather. Even as the cold air from the lobby vent touched her skin. Even as silence tried to pull her down into anger. Then something changed. She looked up, instinctively searching for distraction. Her eyes fell on the large digital monitor near the bank entrance, a slideshow of business partners and local initiatives that usually played in the background, ignored by most customers. But one image caught her attention. There, in crisp resolution, stood her son. Anthony Bradford. Her Anthony. He was in a charcoal suit, standing behind a podium, smiling. The caption read, Bradford Solutions CEO Anthony Bradford speaks at the Gateway Economic Inclusion Summit, presented by First Guardian Bank. Helen blinked, stunned. The screen changed again, now Anthony shaking hands with the mayor. Then another slide, his company logo alongside the bank's. Whispers rippled through the room. A customer gasped softly. Wait, is that the guy on her check? Someone said. Helen sat up. The shame in her chest shifted, became something else. Not pride, exactly. Not anger. Something firmer. Something unshakable. A door opened. The manager, now visibly nervous, stepped out and made his way toward her. Mrs. Bradford, he asked, eyes wide. I think there's been a terrible mistake. Could we talk in my office? Helen looked up at him slowly. I asked to speak to a manager 30 minutes ago, she said. Her voice wasn't raised, but it carried weight now. The man flinched, face reddening. Yes, ma'am. I truly apologize. Please, come with me. Behind him, Danielle's face had gone pale. Her hands hovered uncertainly over her keyboard. She looked like someone who had just realized what she'd done, and who she had done it to. But Helen didn't look at her. She rose from her chair, straightened her dress, and walked toward the manager's office. Not in shame. Not in anger. But in quiet authority. The manager's office was glass-walled, offering little privacy but just enough separation from the buzz outside. Helen stepped inside and remained standing. She wasn't ready to sit, not yet. Not until this man said what needed to be said. Please, Mrs. Bradford, he said quickly, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. I'm Stephen Greer. Again, I'm so sorry. Helen didn't move. Are you sorry because of what happened to me? She asked softly. Or because my son's face is on your wall? Stephen hesitated. That pause said more than any apology ever could. He started, his voice faltering. Yes, that played a role. But mostly, I'm just embarrassed. That is not how we treat our customers. Especially not long-time clients like you. Helen slowly sat down, crossing her hands in her lap. She didn't need to raise her voice, her presence was enough to keep Stephen leaning forward, anxious. She didn't even ask for ID, Helen said calmly. Didn't try to call my son. She looked at me, saw the amount, and shredded it. As if my word meant nothing. Stephen winced. Danielle she's relatively new. Still in training. Training doesn't teach you to ignore someone's humanity, Helen said. He nodded, swallowing hard. You're right. You're absolutely right. She assumed I was lying, Helen continued. And what hurts the most isn't just what she did to me. It's wondering what she would have done to someone else. Someone without a CEO for a son. Someone without a face on your monitors. Stephen blinked rapidly, clearly affected. He reached for a notepad, as if he might need to document every word. I'll contact our regional office, he said. We'll issue a full replacement immediately. In full. If Mr. Bradford can confirm the amount. Helen interrupted, voice still calm. I don't need you to fix the money. I need you to fix the thinking. Those words hit like a stone dropped into a still pond. They echoed inside that quiet office. Outside the glass, a few customers had gathered near the teller line, some glancing toward the office door. Word was spreading, Helen Bradford's son wasn't just a client of the bank. He was one of its biggest partners. Stephen's phone rang. He picked it up quickly. Yes. Yes, she's here, he said into the receiver. I'm with Mrs. Bradford now. I understand. Yes, I'll tell her. He hung up slowly and looked at her with new urgency. That was corporate, he said. They've already heard. They'll be reaching out directly. Helen gave a small nod. Good. I'll let my son know. Stephen shifted awkwardly in his seat. We truly hope this won't affect our relationship with Mr. Bradford's company. Helen stood. That depends. She didn't wait for him to respond. She stepped out of the office and back into the lobby, where the atmosphere had shifted completely. Danielle's desk was now empty, she had been ushered into the back, no doubt for review. A hush had fallen over the space. The screen near the entrance flashed back to Anthony's photo. Beneath it, his quote lingered. We rise by lifting others. Progress means everyone, not just the privileged. Helen's eyes lingered on it for a moment. The irony was now public knowledge. Mrs. Bradford. She turned. It was an older woman with a name tag, Teresa Delgado. One of the longer-standing staff members. I just want to say. I'm sorry. That should have never happened, Teresa said, her voice sincere. I've worked here 15 years. And I've never seen anything like that. Helen offered a soft smile. Thank you. Teresa hesitated, then added, your son's doing amazing things. I saw his speech on YouTube. You raised a good man. Helen's eyes glistened, but she blinked away the emotion. I did my best. She left the bank with her head high. But she wasn't the only one leaving that day with something on her mind, because the next morning, the front door of that branch would open again. And this time, it wouldn't be Helen. It would be Anthony. And he wasn't coming quietly. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear, but the temperature inside First Guardian Bank's Bingham Avenue branch was rising by the minute. At 9:07 a.m. sharp, a sleek gray Tesla pulled into the parking lot. Anthony Bradford stepped out alone, no entourage, no legal team, no camera crew. Just jeans, a clean white tee under a navy windbreaker with the Bradford Solutions logo stitched on the chest. He looked like a man running errands. But the people inside the branch knew better. Stephen Greer was already at the door, flanked by two nervous-looking staff members. His collar looked tighter than usual. He'd barely slept, his inbox had exploded overnight with links to viral tweets, screenshots of Helen's check shredding story, and media inquiries. A blurry photo of their bank's screen displaying Anthony's face had gone viral. The caption read, "Imagine shredding a check from this man's mother, then playing his promo video 5 feet away." Thousands had shared it. And Anthony hadn't even commented, yet. Now he was walking through the door, quiet but purposeful. "Mr. Bradford," Stephen said quickly, stepping forward with an extended hand. Let me start by saying we are deeply sorry for what happened. There's no excuse. Anthony didn't take the handshake. His eyes were scanning behind Stephen, toward the teller counters. Where is she? He asked. The woman who shredded the check. Stephen hesitated. Danielle has been placed on administrative leave, pending internal review. Is that the same as fired? Anthony asked evenly. We have to follow protocol, Stephen replied, suddenly sounding rehearsed. There's a process in place. So your process protects her job before protecting your customer's dignity? Anthony's voice didn't rise, but every word landed sharp and direct. The room fell silent. A few customers nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. Stephen swallowed hard. Mr. Bradford, I know you're upset. I'm not upset, Anthony interrupted. Upset is emotional. This is calculated. He reached into his windbreaker and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Handed it directly to Stephen. This is a list of every business, school district, and non-profit my company works with that banks with First Guardian. If your corporate office wants to keep those relationships, you'll issue a public apology. Today. Stephen's hand trembled slightly as he took the list. I'll get this to them right away. Anthony turned slightly, addressing the entire lobby now. And to be clear, he said, your staff doesn't need diversity training. They need basic human respect. From behind one of the desks, an older gentleman stood slowly. Mr. Bradford, if I may, he said. I'm Arthur. I've worked here since this was a credit union. I'm ashamed of what happened to your mother. If someone treated my daughter like that, he trailed off, shaking his head. Anthony nodded once. Thank you. Then Teresa stepped out from behind the teller row. She didn't hesitate. Her voice was steady and sharp. She didn't even ask for ID. Helen's been banking here longer than I've been employed. That girl looked at her like she was a criminal. Anthony's jaw flexed. My mom has never bounced a check, he said, now facing the entire staff. Never borrowed from a payday loan. Never even asked me for money until that check. She did everything right. And you shredded it. Like it meant nothing. Silence settled like dust on glass. Anthony turned to Stephen again. You can't undo what happened. But you can show the world what kind of institution this is. Or what kind it isn't. Stephen nodded quickly. I'll contact corporate immediately. I'll tell them everything. Anthony's voice softened just a touch. Good. Because if this happened to someone whose face is on your screen, what's happening to the people who aren't? With that, he turned and walked out. He didn't slam the door. He didn't make a scene. He just left the weight of the truth sitting in that room, heavy and unavoidable. Outside, the first local reporter was already setting up a tripod. But the real news was still spreading, on phones, on tweets, and in every whispered conversation at kitchen tables across the city. And Anthony wasn't finished. Anthony didn't return to his office right away. Instead, he crossed the street and ducked into a quiet coffee shop with high ceilings, the kind with chalkboard menus and indie music humming through the air. He sat at a corner table, laptop open, fingers poised above the keyboard. He wasn't interested in lawsuits. Not yet. He was interested in impact. He began typing a post for LinkedIn, then copied it over to his Twitter and Facebook profiles. The words were short, precise, unembellished. Yesterday, my 62-year-old mother was accused of fraud at a bank she's used for decades. She came in to deposit a check I sent her, $9,800 to help with home repairs. The teller shredded it without verifying her ID. An hour later, my face appeared on the bank's digital wall as a featured client. Think about that. He didn't mention the teller's name. He didn't tag the bank. He didn't have to. The post took off like a lit match in dry grass. By noon, it had been shared over 6,000 times. Local influencers reposted it. Then a few journalists. Then the national accounts. Someone created a graphic overlaying Helen's calm, composed face with a headline that read, "They didn't believe her. But they profit from her son." It struck a nerve. Meanwhile, Anthony's phone buzzed relentlessly. 5 interview requests came in before 3 p.m. Local news. National morning shows. Podcasts. Advocacy groups. Everyone wanted a quote, a reaction, a sit-down. But he didn't respond right away. Instead, he called Helen. "Morning, Ma," he said when she answered. "Morning, baby," she replied, voice warm but worn. "How you holding up? I should be asking you that." "I'm all right," she said after a pause. "But I've had better bank visits." Anthony chuckled softly. "Don't let it eat you up," Helen said gently. "You know how the world works." "I do," Anthony said, and his voice steeled. "And that's why I'm not letting it go." There was a quiet pause. Then Helen, with that familiar softness, added, "You always were stubborn. Learn from the best." Across town, the bank's PR department was trying to catch its breath. They had issued a short statement on social media, vague and corporate-sounding. "We deeply regret the incident involving Mrs. Helen Bradford and are reviewing all internal procedures to ensure respectful and fair treatment for every customer." The public wasn't impressed. It didn't name Helen. It didn't acknowledge the shredded check. It didn't even say what had happened. By Friday night, First Guardian's social media pages were flooded with comments demanding accountability. Customers began posting videos of themselves closing accounts. Some left flowers outside the branch in Helen's name. A crayon-scrawled note taped to the glass read, "Sorry they were mean. Your son must love you a lot." Helen saw the picture in a text Anthony sent her. She smiled, but her reply was quiet. "I don't need all this attention," she said. "I just wanted to deposit a check." "You're not being famous," Anthony told her. "You're being heard." By Saturday, a journalist from the St. Louis Dispatch asked to do a profile. Not about Anthony. About Helen. He asked for permission. Helen hesitated. "I don't know if I'm built for all that," she said. "You don't need to be," Anthony told her. "Just talk like you talk to me." She agreed. The article dropped Sunday morning with a quiet but devastating headline. They didn't know her son was a CEO. But Helen Bradford's story speaks for thousands. She didn't rant. She didn't exaggerate. She simply described what she wore, what was said, and how it made her feel. It was her dignity that made it go viral. And soon, it wasn't just Helen's story being told. By Monday morning, the floodgates had burst. Helen Bradford's story was no longer just a headline, it had become a symbol. A mirror. In cities across the country, people began sharing eerily similar experiences. Under hashtags like hashtag Helen Bradford, hashtag Banking While Black, and hashtag Respect is Basic, stories flooded timelines. A retired teacher from Ohio wrote, "They told me my signature didn't match even though I'd signed in front of them." A small business owner in Georgia tweeted, "Was denied a $500 deposit unless I provided a utility bill." A white man walked out next to me with $2,000 cash. No questions. And then came the voices on video. An Iraq War veteran posted a shaky selfie clip. "They told me I couldn't open a basic account because my address looked like a rental." What does that even mean? A community organizer in Chicago shared, "We've been saying this for years. But now folks are listening. Because it happened to the right mother." Helen, meanwhile, stayed out of the spotlight. She was baking cornbread for her neighbor's grandson's birthday. Folding laundry. Watering the front garden. She hadn't changed. But the world around her had. Anthony sat with his communications team Monday evening. His PR director, Keisha Owens, pulled up a graph of the online engagement. "It's not just viral," she said. "It's a movement." "I'm not trying to go viral," Anthony replied. "I'm trying to get heard." Keisha tapped her pen. "Then let's be intentional. We do one sit-down interview. Not just about you. About your mom. About the thousands like her. But it has to feel real. No suits. No lights." Anthony nodded. "At her house. No studio." The next day, they taped it in Helen's modest living room. The walls were lined with family photos and lace-framed scripture quotes. Helen wore a soft blue cardigan and sat in her favorite chair. The interviewer, a calm-voiced woman named Dana Wu, leaned in. "When you walked into that bank," she asked, "did you expect anything out of the ordinary?" Helen smiled gently. "No, baby. I was wearing my church dress. I even brought my ID. I thought I'd be in and out." Dana's next question was quieter. "And when the teller shredded the check, what went through your mind?" Helen paused. Her eyes dropped for just a second. "I thought, if this is what they think of me, a woman with a good dress, a good name, and a good son, then what are they doing to folks who don't have those things?" That clip exploded. By sunrise, the video had over 3 million views. Entire morning shows discussed it. Editorials were written. Comment sections flooded. Even politicians began weighing in. But the bank? They were still scrambling. First Guardian's corporate headquarters, located in Cincinnati, released a new statement. This time, it named Helen. This time, it said the word shredded. This time, it promised a new customer respect initiative and mandatory staff retraining. But it still didn't say the word racism. Or bias. Or we failed. Anthony read the statement 3 times. "They're trying to apologize without actually saying what they did," he muttered. Keisha nodded. "It's damage control. They think if they say just enough, people will move on." But people weren't moving on. In fact, they were just getting started. Internal emails leaked from a whistleblower at the branch showed Danielle defending her actions, writing, "The customer's demeanor was concerning and the check amount suspicious." The word demeanor set social media on fire. Commentators, activists, teachers, parents, everyone latched on. She was a 62-year-old woman in a lavender dress. What demeanor could possibly warrant shredding a check? Public trust in the bank plunged. Screenshots of closed accounts filled TikTok and Facebook. A clip of a customer saying, "If Helen's not safe banking here, I'm not either," went viral. But through it all, Helen stayed quiet. Steady. Until one Thursday night, as Anthony sat beside her on the porch, he asked, "You all right with all this, Ma?" She took a slow sip of tea and nodded. "I didn't ask for it. But maybe this was my time. God gives you a platform sometimes, even when you didn't want one." Then she looked him in the eye. "Just make sure it's not about me. Make it about what's broken." Anthony nodded. And from that moment on, he knew, the spotlight wouldn't be used for outrage. It would be used for change. 2 weeks after the incident, Helen Bradford stood quietly at the front of a small community center on Chippewa Street. Folding chairs filled the room. Seniors, working moms, church members, and even a few teenagers had come, not for a protest, not for a spectacle, but for a workshop. A financial literacy workshop. Organized by Anthony, backed by a few trusted credit unions, and co-sponsored by a neighborhood advocacy group, the goal was simple: empower people like Helen, those who had spent their lives doing things right, only to be doubted in the end. Helen hadn't come to give a speech. But when the speaker canceled last minute, all eyes turned to her. She didn't step behind the podium. She didn't clear her throat like an expert. She simply walked to the front and folded her hands. "When I was 23, she said softly, I tried to open my first checking account. I had a job. I had ID. But the man behind the counter told me I wasn't eligible. Didn't explain. Just turned me away. The room was still. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I just left, and thought maybe that's just how things work. She looked around, making eye contact one by one. But it's not. That's just how some people get treated. And if we never speak up, they'll keep treating us that way. A soft clap came from the back. Then another. Then the room rose to its feet, not for a performance, but for a truth too long ignored. That night, one of the volunteers, a young woman named Marla, approached Anthony. Her voice shook a little. I brought my grandma today, she said. She's never trusted banks. Keeps her money in a tin can under the bed. But after hearing your mom, she wants to try again. Anthony's reply was simple, that's why we're here. Helen never wanted to become a face of change, but she accepted the role with grace. She declined offers to appear on national panels and cable news shows. She turned down interviews, documentaries, and speaking tours. But she said yes to something else. Together, she and Anthony founded the Bradford Fund, a grassroots initiative supporting financial literacy, elder protection, and dignity-first training for banking staff. No marble offices. No national ad campaigns. Just 2 rented rooms above a barbershop in South St. Louis, 1 printer, and a vision. In 6 months, the Bradford Fund helped over 80 individuals open accounts at Community First banks, hosted training sessions for over 50 bank employees, and funded emergency grants for seniors whose funds had been unjustly frozen, flagged, or denied. Helen came in twice a week, usually with sweet tea and a stack of envelopes to fold. She refused a title. She didn't want to be called founder. Just Helen. And as she often told the young volunteers between phone calls and checklists, you don't need to fight loud. You just need to fight right. Anthony continued to lead Bradford Solutions, but every Thursday afternoon, without fail, he blocked off his calendar for the foundation. He spoke at high schools, church groups, and business panels. Not about his own success, but about Helen. About how easy it is to destroy someone's dignity with a single assumption. A single glance. A single motion of a shredder. And he always ended his talk the same way. My mom didn't ask to be treated special. She asked to be treated normal. And that says everything. As for the bank, First Guardian Bank's reputation in St. Louis never fully recovered. That branch on Bingham Avenue quietly replaced its manager. Danielle's employment was officially terminated after a policy review. A generic email circulated months later confirming new training protocols, but by then, most of the city had moved on. They didn't forget. They just chose something better. Helen, meanwhile, still shopped at the same corner store. Still waved to the kids next door. Still wore her lavender church dress on Sundays. But every so often, a stranger would stop her on the sidewalk, hand extended, eyes full of emotion. Are you Helen Bradford? And Helen, with her modest smile, would answer. Depends. Are you finally seeing me now? Helen Bradford never set out to make headlines. All she wanted was to deposit a check from her son. But what began as an ordinary errand became a national story, one that exposed what dignity looks like in the face of disrespect. Her story reminds us, it's not fame that gives someone value. It's character. And it's long past time for institutions to treat every person with the respect they've earned. As Helen said, you don't need to fight loud. You just need to fight right. If this story moved you, subscribe to True Echo for more real, powerful stories that deserve to be heard. Share this video. Leave a comment. Let us know if you've ever felt dismissed, unseen, or disrespected. Because your story matters too.